Hello and welcome back to my SC-500 certification exams. Today we're going to be talking about authentication methods. But before we do that, for those of you who maybe this is the first time that you watch this video, this is the class. So if you go to any search engine, Bing, Google, and you look for the SC certification exam. So we are into this. And so you can read about what this certification is and all that. But specifically, this video, it's about this study guide. When you click on this, it will take you to this study guide for this certification. Now, as I said before, this is a course that you can follow on Microsoft Learn, and it's really useful. My recommendation is that you go through this course and the study guide. So go through the course, and then once you're done, come back and watch my videos. You're gonna be all set. Or if you don't want to go through the course, I recommend that you do that. It's a lot of fun reading, but if you don't want to do that, you can watch my videos and should be able to pass the exam watching my videos as well. Anyway, so it's up to you, but here we are, and these are the domains. We have already covered implement and configure privilege identity management. That's a video for that. And we have also covered implement conditional access policies. And today we are going to cover the 1.3, objective 1.3, which is implement and configure authentication methods, including multi-factor authentication, MFA, and passwordless. So that's what we are here to talk about today. So if we come back to the environment, we are at the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. When you come here, if you come into Entra ID and you expand this portion over here, you are going to come into the Microsoft authentication methods. But notice that multi-factor authentication is a separate link. You go, okay, but shouldn't we be talking about multi-factor authentication first? Well, actually, no. A couple of things I want to discuss here. Well, first of all, for a couple of months now, so Microsoft, at the time of this recording, Microsoft has forced everyone to use multi-factor authentication. You cannot basically log in to Office 365 to the admin center without multi-factor authentication. So that it's you must use multi-factor. But before, so let's go back over here. If we go into multi-factor authentication, before you would basically come over here and you could configure this individually. So notice that if you look at the status over here, it says that multi-factor authentication is disabled. So you could come over here on an individual basis and select this. You cannot do that anymore because multi-factor authentication, it is enabled by default. And the way it is enabled, it's through a conditional access policy. And since we are here just to get this out of the way, and then we'll cover the authentication methods in detail. But if we go into the conditional access policy and we look at those policies, here is this policy. So this policy was created, it was forced to, so you need to use this. So, but what you do is you created conditional access policies to force people to use MFA. With this conditional access policies turned on, there is no way that you can sign in if you don't enable multi-factor authentication, if you don't use because this would enable multi-factor authentication. So when you click when you click on create a new policy, you have to give it a name, which you can just give it whatever name you want, but something that it's uh, descriptive, if you want to call it. Assignment. Who do you want to? So when you create a conditional access policy, you need to choose who do you want to assign this policy to. And when we click here, we want to assign this to all users and groups. It is important, and I have talked about this before, that there may be accounts that you want to exclude, especially, like your global administrator account. But again, the global administrator needs to use multi-factor anyway. But in this case, the directory synchronization accounts, it's being excluded, um, because again, that's for hybrid company that um, synchronize to the cloud. We're not going to get into that now. We'll talk about that later. But anyway, so important to understand that when you create a policy, there is this include button, but it's also an exclude. And sometimes it's a good practice to exclude users and groups because you could lock yourself out. But in this case, we want all users, and we want to apply this to all resources. This used to be called all cloud apps. It's now called all resources. So it doesn't matter where you go in, what portal you go in Office 365, you are going to be required to use multi-factor authentication. Uh, no need to worry about the network piece here or any conditions. Uh, then you're going to go into access controls. And in the access control, you get either grant or block. And what we want to do is we want to grant access, but we want to require multi-factor authentication. So once you do that, click on select, you're done, right? And the other piece, so no need to worry about sessions. Again, when you created conditional access policies, you don't have to use everything. Most of the time, you don't use all these components, depending on what the access policy does. And the last thing is the policy has to be on. A policy when you create can be in either report mode only, on or off. In this case, the policy is on. So basically, what that means is that for this tenant, multi-factor authentication is turned on at the tenant level, and you don't have to do that individually. You cannot do that individually because again, this overrides everything else. So that being said, multi-factor is enabled, period. There's nothing you can do about it. Now, what we can manipulate, what we can configure is multi-factor authentications. And actually, that's right here. Authentication methods, not multi-factor authentication, but authentication methods. Authentication methods in Microsoft Entra ID define how users provide their identity when accessing applications, data, and services. These methods are used for sign in, multi factor authentication, self service password reset, which we'll cover later as well, and passwordless authentication. So instead of replying or relying only on passwords, organizations can enable different methods based on user roles, risk level, and security requirements. Some authentication methods, as seen here, are stronger than others, like passkeys, FIDO2, Microsoft Authenticator, and certificate-based authentication provide stronger protection because they are more resistant to phishing attacks. These methods help reduce password dependency and make it harder for attackers to steal credentials through fake login pages or social engineering. And so all the methods such as SMS, voice call, and email one-time passwords are easier for users to understand and deploy, but they are considerably weaker. So SMS calls can be intercepted, phone numbers can be compromised through SIM swapping, and email-based codes depend on the security of the user's mailbox. Microsoft Entra ID also supports temporary access passwords, which is useful for onboarding users or for helping them recover access. So if you something happens, if you lose your phone and you have multi-factor authentication, how do you get access? Well, an admin will come in and create a temporary password for you to get in. OAuth hardware and software tokens generate one-time passcode as well. And well, verified ID supports trusted digital identity claims. We'll talk about verified ID and some other of these methods later on. But the main goal is to basically choose, methods that balance security and usability. And for this, organization should prioritize phishing-resistant methods whenever possible. So here we are, my authentication methods. We see that passkey is enabled for users, so they can use that multi-factor authentication as well. But notice that SMS is disabled, so people cannot use SMS because again, SMS is weak. And if you wanted to enable, you could click on that and enable if you wanted to, which we're not going to do. But anyway, so that's what this authentication methods it's all about here. And again, the temporary access password, it's also enabled. So as I just said, if let's say that a user, you know his or her phone is stolen, he loses the phone, he won't be able to access the his environment, because again he needs the multi-factor authentication, for example, on his phone. In that case, we can come over here and we could just create a temporary password for that user, and then that user, you know um, it's able um, to sign in. uh, where did I go? Okay. uh, Authentication method. Anyway, so that's what basically authentication method it's about. So you can choose to disable. I've already chosen those, but those are the kind of things you can do there. And this is using MFA with Microsoft. Yes, there's a lot more complex, but you could also add it. Some companies do not use MSA. Microsoft, they use external um, external um, MFA, and you can do that as well. We're not going to go through that, but that's where you would do something like that. So again, here we are at the policies, and again, these are the policies that are available. There's a whole bunch of them. You can read through them. The QR code, verified ID. Again, some of these we'll touch later, but these are we're using multi-factor authentication in this case, in this tenant. So when I try to log in, it will send me a code to the Microsoft Authenticator app that I have on my phone, and then that's the way that I sign in. It's important to understand this for the exam. When it comes to, since we are on this page, when it comes to authenticate, password protection, what this means is that if this company is extremely, for example, this tenant is based on the web, I don't have any hybrid thing going on, no accounts are synchronized on the web or anything like that. So the lockout threshold, if someone type in the password 11 times, then it's going to be locked. So they have up to 10 times they can try that. The lockout duration is 60 minutes. Basically means that after the minimum length in seconds, after 60 minutes, then the person could try it again, right? And here you can create what is called um, banned passwords, right? Because so this is to prohibit people from using. Although a lot of these passwords, so as soon as you turn banned passwords, there are a lot of passwords that Microsoft already has some kind of like a library, a dictionary that you will not be able to use in Office 365. But you can create your own, custom list of banned passwords if you wanted to as well. Okay. And password protection for Windows Server Active Directory. So it says enable password protection on Windows Server Active Directory. So again, if you are in a hybrid environment and people use Active Directory to sign in, then you can synchronize this so that people cannot use that in Active Directory. A little bit more complex and in a hybrid environment, but that's what that is all about. We'll talk about hybrid as we move along, but that's basically what it is. Right now, it is only there's two mode: audit and enforce, and these are the kind of questions. These are tricky questions. You may get a scenario in which they're going to say, "Hey, is this going to be enforced in Active Directory?" But then the screenshot, it's in audit. Because it's in audit, it's not going to be enforced, right? So it's important to pay attention to these details because you're definitely going to get questions about those things over there. Okay. Some reason, I think that I have not gotten the right permissions to do this, but anyways, something is not working there. Um, we can take a look at that later on. So the registration campaign again, so like if you want to start building a stronger authentication methods, you can kind of create a campaign to kind of start moving to a more um, to a stronger authentication method. In this case, again, Microsoft has really kind of pushed the boundary in which people have to use this as strong methods anyway. At least in this case, it's configured that way. Authentication strength. This component here determine the combination of authentication methods that can be used. So I've created a um, authentication strength called Ignite Phishing Resistant MFA. So basically, meaning that I can create a policy with conditional access policy forcing people to use pass keys, for example, and then you would have to go and configure the pass keys on those devices, and that's really a password resistant MFA, which we may take a look at that later as well. In terms of settings, a couple of things you can do over here. This is managed by Microsoft for all users, and you could also so basically what this does is a allows users to report suspicious activities if they receive authentication requests that they did not initiate. That's what this is about. So this control is available when using the Microsoft Authenticator app and voice calls. So reporting suspicious activity will set the user risk to high. And then if the user is subject to risk-based conditional access policies, they may be blocked. And the reporting code, you can choose that as well. So this determines the default method shown to users during sign-in. By default, Microsoft defines the preferred order of authentication methods, prioritizing the most secure methods from top to bottom. But that's what that it's all about. In terms of monitoring, you can see what's going on over here, the registration. For example, it says here that users capable of Azure multi-factor authentication, 5 out of 8. Users capable of passwordless authentication, 0 out of 8. In other words, I'm not using passwordless authentication, and that's another thing that we will cover later on. And let's see, users capable of self-service password reset. Again, we'll cover a video with that later on as well. User registration details. We saw this earlier. So these are the users and the authentication method capable. So you can see that here as well. And registration and resets events. This is just for monitoring things. But anyway, so the most important thing again is these policies to understand what the authentication methods are and to have some idea about these methods because you're going to get definitely questions about that in the exam. And with that, we conclude this video about authentication methods. So we are literally on objective 3. So this is domain 1, objective 3, implement and configure authentication methods, including multi-factor authentication and passwordless. So That's basically uh, what what we were here for. I hope that you can continue to watch this if you're interested in this certification, or even if you're not taking the cert, but you're interested in these topics. If you're an admin, then if you find this information useful, please like my content. But most importantly, please subscribe to my channel. It means a lot to me, and that way you also are informed when new content is available. Well, thank you for watching. I hope to see you in my next episode.